2025 tax saving moves. We're approaching the last year of the current tax provisions, especially around Roth conversions. Join us this week as we discuss the future of the current tax code and what moves people should be considering as we head into 2025.
Welcome to Label on Fire with Label Sternbach, the financial independence and retirement show dedicated to helping you build the life of your dreams as fast as possible with as little stress as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Label on Fire.
I'm Freddie Bell with Label Sternbach, and he is the man. He's Amazon's best-selling author of Living with Financial Anxiety and also the author of the book called Authenticity. And he's got a wonderful website, yields4u.com. Just really quickly, Label, I want to say welcome, first of all, and what can we find at yields4u.com?
On yields4u.com, you will find everything that you need as an investor to figure out how to retire, whether you have enough money to retire, create a sound financial plan. We have tools on there to figure out about Roth conversions, RMDs, Social Security, when to take Social Security and, match it up with your spouse. We even have tools to help you create an income and investment plan.
All right, that's a good backdrop because I've got a question. We mentioned that we're going to be talking about taxes, and let's start with the obvious question, if you don't mind, sir. Is this even an issue now with Trump in office? Will the tax code get extended? What's going to happen with it?
So that honestly is one of those questions that keep me up at night.
Wow.
There aren't a lot of things that keep me up at night. What's happening in the market, that doesn't keep me up because our investment strategy is rock solid and it does exactly what it's supposed to do. And I monitor that every day and I'm happy with that. What does keep me up at night is the taxes.
Why is that, Label? Why does it keep you up at night?
Because we've got some real fundamental pressures on the federal government. And the primary tool that they have to solve these problems is going to have to come down to taxes at some point. Because the tool that they've been using is we borrow and we borrow and we keep borrowing more money. And when you hear that the federal government is borrowing, what you should really be telling yourself is they are taking money out of my future pocket. They are taking money from future me to pay current me. And that works fine as long as the economy keeps growing and the tax base keeps growing, except that's not what's happening, right? Our economy is growing, but our tax base is not growing because, let's face it, most Americans are retiring, right? And the people who are my age and younger are getting less and less and they're having kids less and less. So that means that there are less people to pay back this future loan. And that bill is starting to come due. And that bill comes due in the form of interest payments because basically the government, like any deadbeat, they borrowed more than they can afford and they borrowed it against an asset that didn't exist. And now it's perfectly fine as long as they can make the interest payments. As long as you can make that minimum monthly payment, nobody cares. The problem is that we've had the interest rates have been a wild ride, right? And we've had interest rates went up to 5.25%, 5.5%. Consumers loved it, right? Us as investors, it's free money, right? We're getting 5.5%, very low risk, right? It's great. Wall Street hates it because they stop being able to borrow money for free and basically go buy companies or buy assets that paid money, right? So any kind of, real investor was upset about it, but retirees loved it because it's free money and low risk, right? Now, the problem is that the federal government, they have all these debts, right? They have trillions of dollars in debt. And that trillions of dollars of debt, it has to pay the interest that we were enjoying. And that interest payment, right, when it was 0%, was a small number. When it went to 5%, it became a very big number. And the problem is that we don't know where interest rates are going to go. And as we borrow more and more money, and the Federal Reserve is not reducing interest rates quickly enough, eventually that amount of money that we have to pay in interest payments is going to become a very significant amount of money. And where is the government going to get the money to pay those debts, to pay those interest payments. They're going to have to pay it. And if the federal government defaults on the interest payments, then it will skyrocket the interest rates and it'll cause all kinds of problems. So you got to ask yourself the question of where are they going to get the tax dollars to pay the interest? And how sustainable is the spending going to be if, the tax base keeps shrinking?
Well, let's level set right here then, Label. Remind our listeners about what the tax provisions are that are set to expire.
Yeah. So Trump, in his first term, he passed a law called the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which was primarily a Republican bill. However, the Democrats did get some concessions in order to get it passed. What it does and what it did was it solved a problem in the tax code. The tax code prior to the Tax Cut and Jobs Act had a fundamental problem that the tax brackets were not adjusted for inflation. So every few years, Congress had to get together and they had to adjust the tax brackets. Congress hadn't done that in quite a while at the point that the Tax Cut and Jobs Act came along. And they hadn't done it for a while, and most people were finding themselves in the 22 or plus tax bracket, which was significant. You were earning, $30,000, $40,000 a year, and you were paying 20% plus to the federal government. There are also a whole lot of provisions that came about that make life a lot easier for most people, make life easier for the IRS, that were included in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. So the most significant of those is, number one, it automatically adjusts the brackets for inflation. So the Congress doesn't have to every year come along and adjust it. It adjusts automatically. What that means is the last, 5 years where we've had really significant inflation, the tax code has kept up with that inflation. Those brackets have increased. So you haven't found yourself automatically in a higher tax bracket just because you're making more money because everything costs more money. Mm-hmm. However, if the Tax Cut and Jobs Act expires and we go back to the old tax code, all of a sudden everyone's going to be in the highest tax bracket just because of inflation. So that is a major part of the provision. Another one was people used to have to itemize their deductions. You had to keep receipts for everything, and you would submit that along with your taxes. You would calculate it all up, and you would that would reduce your taxable income. And some people got huge deductions. Other people didn't have a lot of deductions, and so it kind of wasn't fair, and it was a lot of work, and it was something that everyone got audited on was on those deductions. And so one of the things the Tax Code and Jobs Act did was it created a standard deduction that's adjusted for inflation that says the first $15,000, the first $30,000 of income, and again, increases every year, is automatically wiped off the table. You don't pay taxes on that. And so that combined with tax brackets that are pretty favorable and are adjusted for inflation keep people in a lower tax bracket than they ordinarily would be. That's the great part of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. It's set to expire at the end of this year. So this year is the last year that the Tax Cut and Jobs Act will be in effect. At the end of 2025, so 2026, Congress has to either extend the law, renew it, or make it permanent, because that's actually what it says, is that it needs to be made permanent, or they need to come up with a new tax code.
So what's going to happen? Are we going to... Do your tea leaves say that it will be extended?
So conventional wisdom says, well, Trump made it the first time. It's his legacy. He's going to want to extend it. It's just an automatic thing. I've heard that said from so many people that it's just going to automatically be extended. However, somewhere buried in those provisions, because it did require bipartisan support to pass, buried in there is some provisions that were designed to make this not be an election issue. So that's one of the reasons why it's set to expire at the end of 2025, not in 2024. They didn't want it to be central to an election, even though it sort of became one. However, the other thing they put in there is that in order to renew it, it did not need just a majority of the Senate to pass it. It required 60 votes.
Supermajority.
Well, not quite a supermajority, just more than a majority. So the question is can we get bipartisan support for it again? Right. And I don't know if those cards are on the table this time around.
Interesting. So what can we do to protect ourselves as investors, as retirees? Is there a way to maneuver our tax liability so that if we do take a loss, that it'll be minimal?
So yes, we need to keep our eye on what's happening in Congress, but we also need to act under the assumption that this is going to be the last year of this tax code. Because I think no matter what, even if they just extend it as is, I think it's going to be used as an opportunity to make changes to the tax code, whether that is to add taxes or to decrease taxes, right? Who knows which one, but there's going to be changes made. Also, we have the fact that we do have, a number of natural disasters that are occurring or have occurred, and those are being footed by our tax payers, and the money needs to come from somewhere. So far, we've spent money that doesn't exist, and we haven't had to pay the bill yet. But when we have to pay the bill, it's going to have to come from somewhere. And so that how those taxes get raised, that's still a big question. So having said that, the moves that we're looking at for making for our clients, and this is not an exhaustive list, but the big ones that you should consider. Number one, Roth conversions, right? Because, tax brackets are favorable right now. We know, statistically speaking, tax brackets probably have to increase for most people, not for everyone, but for most people, it will probably go up at some point in the future. So Roth conversions is something that you really want to take a close look at. Other things that you want to take a close look at is tax loss harvesting and resetting your cost basis on things. So tax loss harvesting is, when an asset goes down, you sell it, buy something that is not substantially similar so that you can lock that tax loss on your tax return, but you don't lock the loss in the market. Lots of different strategies for how to implement that. That is something that we are getting very aggressive with for our clients. Something else to consider is resetting your cost basis. So using those losses up, because one of the things that Congress can do is just say, okay, we're not going to have tax loss carry forwards, capital loss carry forwards, where you're going to be able to use that indefinitely into the future. They may cap that and say, oh, well, you got 1 year to use it. You got to use it in the tax year that it occurred, right? So you want to think about, well, what are the things that I can do to kind of use the current tax code to my advantage? Something else, if you've gotten out operating losses, that's something to consider because that's one of the things on the chopping block. The other thing is unrealized capital gains, right? So that's also where resetting the cost basis makes sense. One of the things that Congress has talked about repeatedly is taxing the unrealized, so you have assets that you haven't sold and you have all these gains baked into them. They're talking about taxing that before you sell it. Right. So even though you didn't sell it, so now you got to think about, okay, maybe I want to strategically sell that so that I bring down what that cost is so that I don't get impacted by the capital gains, unrealized capital gains in the future. So think about the moves that you can make. Gifting, if that's something that you're considering, is something that you want to look at. Mm-hmm. The good news is that the Secure Act kind of, codified a whole bunch of the gifting stuff. So it's separate from the tax code, but there is still overlap between the two because you have, gifting and where you're getting the source of that gift. That's going to, be kind of dictated by your taxes. So something to think about.
We're just about out of time, but it seems like from this discussion that you're of the opinion that taxes are going to go up. Is that right?
I think there's no two ways about it. Taxes have to go up. Interest rates aren't going back to zero. Our debt has increased dramatically. We have a whole lot of drains on our economy that we have to pay for, and that money has to come from somewhere. And taxes is kind of the next logical place for it to come from, because I don't think that they could cut benefits to Social Security and Medicare. And if that's out of the window, then really, raising taxes is the next best bet.
I understand. He's Label Sternbach. We got to leave it right there. But if you'd like more information, you can visit yields4u.com. That's yields4u. That's the number 4, the letter U.com. I'm Freddie Bell, and I'm glad that you're with us today. That's all the time we've got. So join us again next week as we talk about the future of interest rates and how they relate to your investments.
If you would like to see how the Yields for You team can help you get off the Wall Street roller coaster and save you money on taxes so you can live the life of your dreams, book an appointment online at yieldsforyou.com or call 410-914-4894.
Yields for You is a registered investment advisor in the state of New York and only transacts business in states where the firm is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Registration as an investment advisor is not an endorsement. Information presented on this program is believed to be factual and up to date, but we do not guarantee its accuracy and it should not be regarded as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. Discussion should not be construed as an offer to buy or sell or solicitation of any offer to buy or sell the investments mentioned. Annuity guarantees are subject to the claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company. Content should not be viewed as legal or tax advice. Always consult an attorney or tax professional regarding your specific legal or tax situation.